del Sol Park now. This is the Alameda interchange. This is the Chavez interchange, just so you can get oriented. So, systemic ecological art and design provides multiple benefits for expanded watershed nature walk and gateways to the watershed. And there are multiple benefits. This is, why do one thing when we can do 25 things? That's what systemic ecological design is about. So, social, cultural, and environmental justice benefits. We can engage and involve all sectors of the community from the watershed. We can collaborate with multiple city, state, federal agencies. We can make the areas safe and accessible where the freeway has severed the communities. We can create multiple interactive opportunities for people, including integrated school and community education. Provide opportunities for green skills, job training, becomes an outdoor classroom for maintenance. Create a sense of place and wonder. What a concept. And create interest at ground level from the freeway. So it becomes a real place in and of itself. And showcase the local resources through the multifunctional sculptural green power digital gateways that I mentioned. And what are the ecological benefits? Mitigating flooding along the freeway corridors and the interchanges and in the neighborhoods where there is a lot of flooding. Combat climate change through ponding, bioswales, and creek daylighting. And create resilient as it relates to climate change, either drought-tolerant or riparian landscapes to link the communities, and of course re-attract wildlife by creating habitat and beauty and pollination opportunities. And there are multiple funding opportunities to create this work from a variety of sources, governmental and private. So this is the Alameda Freeway interchange. There's a lot of open space, as you can see. There's a lot of dead space, a lot of flooding. This is the area that I mentioned. This is Mission Street. This is Highway 280. And this is the end of Cayuga Avenue. And there's a lot of flooding here. I mean, you've probably seen it on the news. People are very upset. But what I'm seeing is that there's all of this Caltrans property behind there that could become a confluence community, Islay Creek Watershed Confluence Community Park, so that we can actually, instead of it just being a negative situation, I mean, it's like, how do you turn it into a positive and use the resources more appropriately, frankly? So there is open space there. I've walked it many times. And something could be done there that would help to keep the flooding from happening. So what LifeFrames, which is a nonprofit, and I are doing is working with all of these diverse city agencies to make this happen, to actually incorporate a living library systemic ecological approach and vision in these places and to expand this work. So now what I'm going to show you, this is, I did a presentation for Caltrans, which is the state agency that is in charge of the freeways. And the reason why I'm showing you this is that the way I framed it, this work for them, is something that I thought you might like to know about since you're in Escuela and learning strategies. And what I told Caltrans, which is often an entity that people fear, and say, you just can't, they're so hard to work with. And so what I told them is, actually, you're not hard to work with. I've had 2 really positive experiences with Caltrans in earlier times. And this is just, and Caltrans was very creative. I supported them in their creativity and expanded consciousness. So I showed them some images. So I started with portable parks from 1970, because in 1970 I had to get an encroachment permit from Caltrans in order to do this work. It was actually a legal intervention. And I'll never forget this. I went to visit with Mr. Hart, who was the superintendent, or was the head of the whole state of Caltrans. He was in charge of the whole state highway system. And on his desk was a little easel, like a little gold easel, with a small image, with this kind of delicate kind of watercolor. And it had the rainbow arches on the tunnel going into Sausalito. And he held it up to me and he said, you know, I'm thinking of doing this. Do you think it's a good idea? And I said, yes, it's a great idea. When he, of course, went on to do that. But I knew immediately when he asked me that question that that would make it possible to do something very temporary. And of course, at that time, a very temporary situation where you would have a cow on the freeway and palm trees and sod for 24 hours didn't seem like a big deal because it was never a question that had been posed before. Now I don't think they would let us do it. But then it was okay and it was done. And then the second Portable Park 2 was the concrete islands at the Mission Van Ness off-ramp. And for 24 hours, we had picnic tables and more animals. And here are the Caltrans guys that I was talking to, with the freeway traffic going by. So it was very surreal. And Caltrans was great. I mean, they were with it. The Highway Patrol, however, gave everybody tickets when we had a press conference on the top of the freeway. And then Portable Park 3 was Maiden Lane, and the whole street was closed off. And then I borrowed animals from the zoo. So that, in a way, that was much easier. But Caltrans was great. And then with the farm, Caltrans also figured in. So this was the idea of the farm, beginning in 1974. Center of the freeway, state right-of-way, cluster of buildings, and 2 privately held open spaces. So the idea was to bring all of these land fragments together and to bring the people from the communities of Mission, Bernal, Potrero, and Bayview together where the freeway had severed them, and to also bring them together not only with each other, but with plants and animals. So that was just like the idea of the farm. But the state, this was Caltrans property. So again, I went to the state, and they were great. And we got access to that land. And it's still state property, and it's still there. So here's a before and after of the farm, of what became Potrero del Sol Park. It's now called Potrero del Sol Park. So this was a Recreation and Parks Department project. It was actually Trust for Public Lands' first inner-city project. I went to them in 1975 and got them involved. At that time, they were really lawyers, basically lawyers who were able to, whose work was to access open space land for public use. Now they do other things. Now they do all sorts of things. But this was the original drawing for the farm, which showed how, you know, all of these different activities could be integrated into the landscape. And this is a side elevation drawing that showed the rolling hills. And you'll notice that Potrero del Sol Park has rolling hills. How many of you know that park? Okay. Well, what I had envisioned in the 70s, and you see this blue, this is all the ponds with windmills that could be created because of all the water that's there. But what the city did in its wisdom, spelled W-I-Z-D-U-M-B, they put in a fake pond right here using Hetch Hetchy water. That's water that comes from Yosemite, you know, not the groundwater. And that's now the skateboard rink, because of course the park didn't work because it wasn't activated. And the whole point of what I was trying to do way back when was to say, okay, we have a nonprofit organization, we're doing all of these community programs. The idea is to integrate the community into this landscape and have ongoing programs, and we will help maintain this park and activate it. But that's not what happened, because in 1980, late 70s, 1980, the Parks Department was like really uptight. Once they owned the land, it was their land. And they, you know, the idea of the public-private partnership was very new. now it's common because we all understand that we have to join forces to make things work. That's what we do. But at that time, it was so new that they were very defensive and fearful of somebody on their land. And in fact, they put up a gate between the farm and the open space. I mean, it was stupid. Anyway, one of the scenes from 1976 from the farm next to the freeway. And of course, the farm and the freeway I saw as a diptych, the relationship of the farm as this non-mechanized form of nature in relationship to this technological monolith of the freeway. And this is the first garden on state land. And again, the state landscape architects were fabulous, and we were going to have a state preschool. So they said, okay, you can use this land, but we have to put up a fence here so that people will be safe, which made sense. And so they said, well, we're going to put up a chain link fence. And I said, no, let's not do that. Let's do something nicer. So what we came up with at the time was redwood with mesh, and it's still there. And it's very strong, and it's a lot nicer than chain link. And then, because of the preschool, this is the same garden some years later, they said, we have to have a fence. So I said, well, can we put up a picket fence? So the state put up the picket fence. So I was very happy. They were terrific to work with. So that's what I remind them today, that they're very creative and easy to work with. So these are some images from that time. And this is the Raw Egg Animal Theater, the initial spelled treat. It was a very fabulous learning environment for children and others. And the point of this was not to be raising animals to eat, but to understand the native intelligences of these different species. And so that's what we did. So this is a view from the farmhouse kitchen toward the center of the freeway. And I had benches from Mexico in the middle of the freeway. There's one of them, and also in the lower garden. And then these are the gardens that were in the center of the freeway in the 70s. Oh, and here are those benches. And this is a brass quintet from the San Francisco Symphony with a celebration and humor of the freeway gardens and the Cityscapes exhibition at the Fine Arts Museums. And we had a celebration of champagne and sonata, and people drank champagne, and this is all in the middle of the freeway. And this is what it looks like today. How many of you know this place? It's really derelict. It's horrible. It's really horrible. So it doesn't have to be this way. It can become this northern gateway to the watershed, which it is, and be transformed. So this image, I'm showing you this because this is how it started. This is 1970. This is Sitting Still 1. And this was an area of garbage and water that had been collected because they were doing construction. I was facing the construction of this freeway interchange that I just showed you. This is 1970. So at the time, I was exploring the nature of what a performance could be and who an audience could be and where a performance could be. So I came upon this, and I saw this, and I immediately went home and put on an evening gown and called my friend and said, please come and photograph this in a particular way. So I was facing the people in the cars moving very slowly. They were the audience because of the construction. But what I didn't know, this is what I thought is, I'm just demonstrating how a seated human figure can transform the environment very simply. And then I went on to do a series of sitting still pieces in different neighborhoods. I took a chair with me, an armchair, not that one. This was huge waterlogged, but I took an armchair to 20th and Mission, to Church and Market, to the Financial District, the original Occupy, California Montgomery, and then Bank of America Plaza, and then also to the Golden Gate Bridge and various indoor-outdoor cages at the San Francisco Zoo. But what I didn't know at this time is that I was facing what would become the farm, literally. I was facing the northern frame of the Islayas Creek watershed that, as you can tell, I'm very involved with. I was facing the freeway interchange that I'm now proposing to become the northern gateway to the watershed. And I was sitting in water from the Islayas Creek. So this is a very profound piece. I call this my watershed piece. You know, this has to do with the spiritual dimension of art and the power of water and the power of art. When you're really in your alignment, it's not something that I thought I was doing. I had no clue until decades later. So I tell you this because, as I said earlier, art is the most powerful transformational methodology that we have available to us as human critters. So this is where I was sitting. I was sitting right here, facing this, and here's the farm in the northern frame. So that's very powerful. And I didn't realize this until sometime later. So this is the 60th anniversary commemorative journal for the United Nations. And in it is a page on a living library, the international, sort of the global vision of this work. And that's it. So if there are questions.
There are some questions.
Back.
Hi there. I found this really interesting because I'm a local resident in Bernal, and so a lot of what you were talking about was in my neighborhood.
Oh.
And I just wonder, you referenced it at the very end about the homeless people, what it looks like now, and I'm wondering if you have had the opportunity to involve the homeless people in any of your projects, to look at their environment and their condition and maybe find ways to help them to learn.
Absolutely. I mean, I have not enough because I'm not doing that enough. But obviously, it's not just about displacing people. You know, that's not the point. But the point is to I mean, that's a very complex question. I mean, the city is trying to figure it out for sure, and they haven't done a very good job of it. But you know, people need to have places to live, but they don't need to be living in the center of a freeway interchange. I mean, I think it's time for us to reclaim this and also to figure out how, you know, they can be involved in a different, you know, they could also be involved in helping to maintain it, to plant it, that sort of thing, and to enjoy it.
I was thinking about skill building.
Skill building, skills.
Like you're doing with the kids, helping them to learn,
yeah,
you know, how to contribute to the environment in a way which could actually help them to improve their situation.
They might be candidates for some of the green skills training. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, some of them may not be. I mean, that's not something that everybody wants to do. But it's not. I mean, it's not that we want to be negative with people, but we have to find better solutions. And I mean, basically, the reason that it's become the place that it is, I mean, I happen to understand why. And it's because it's not an activated place. Also, Department of Public Works, they kept putting up fences to keep people out. Well, that immediately wants, you know, people to come in. So, you know, but it's very complicated. And it's a mess. It really is a mess, and it shouldn't be such a mess. Anybody else? Oh, one thing I'd like to say, I'd like to make an announcement. I am looking for garden ecology arts teachers to work in the schools program. I don't know if there's anyone here that might be interested, or if you might know people. The qualifications are you have to know how to work with children, and you have to be skilled in gardening and hands-on doing, the doing part of talk, think, feel, and do. And I don't know if anyone's here, but please let me know if you're interested or if you have friends.
maybe I didn't hear it correctly, but you were talking about when you went from being a performer to like engaging in more participatory activity, but you kept referring to it as performance, as opposed to like maybe the politicization of your art practice or something like that. Can you just go back over that and like describe what happened to you that made it so that you went from being like a kind of staging performer to like what we would
Sure.
think of as an activist?
Well, I mean, in my early work, I was exploring what a performance could be and who and where it could be and that sort of thing. And then I realized, I mean, after I did many, many different kinds of works, this is in the early 70s, I realized that the ultimate performance was being a total human being. And, you know, so then I decided, okay, I'm doing the performance of being, B-E-I-N-G. And performance then evolved, and also gradually the works became more participatory, meaning the place integrated with what goes on in the place. So I saw the other people as also being performers, just because that's the way I see the world, whether they know it or not. It's not like I'm going to be in this play, but it's life theater in a sense. And so performance has evolved to become hands-on learning in a place or other community programs in a place. And I'm still doing the performance of being. And I tell teachers who work with me, you know, I just announced that we're looking for teachers. I say being a teacher is being a performance artist, because you have to be out there, you have to be compelling. Otherwise, why will anybody listen to you if it's not interested? Does that answer your question?
Kind of. But I was thinking that, like, why would you keep calling it performance?
Why do I call it performance?
Yeah, why keep, like, I mean, I can see the line.
I don't particularly call it performance, but except when I'm talking to people who are interested in performance art, because I think, you know, to explain the evolution of that work is maybe interesting. But I don't say I mean, it's not always what I say.
Well, I was interested in that you said, like, this is just another kind of performance, and that made me very interested. I like the idea of it, that's all.
Well, right. Well, I mean, for example, one of the works that I did some years ago is I was a short order cook and a chef and a waitress at Andy's Donuts in the Castro. And I worked the graveyard shift, and I was dealing with cultural costumes, and so I wore these cultural costumes at work. And then I was asked to be on a jury, and I really wanted to be on a jury. This is 1973. And I thought, well, if I say I'm an artist, they're probably not going to want me, they might not want me to be on the jury. So I didn't. I said I was a waitress. So the waitress went with her bouffant hairdo and certain cultural costumes and went for jury duty and was on the jury. And what I noticed in the courtroom is that everybody was a performer. The judge, the lawyers, the witnesses. I mean, it was all theater. That's how I saw it. And then I created an installation called Well-Liked and Learned Lawyers Win Cases. So, I mean, for example, I think Trump is a performance artist. Not a good one, but that's a whole other story. But that's just how I see the world, maybe. I don't know why. But it's our human activity. And to me, it's theater.
Can you speak a little bit about how you hand off a project to the people that maintain it and what that's like, and just how you transfer some of the vision and the ideas, and then really how these things keep going maybe as you step away?
Well, I'm still involved, so I haven't stepped away yet. So, and that is a challenge. It's a really good question and good challenge. And so that's kind of a process of becoming, I would say. But it's a goal to, I mean, for example, with the schools programs, I have people who are handling that now, and they're doing a great job, and I'm not there all the time. So, you know, I wish we had more money to pay them more and that sort of thing. But the idea is to have it become more sustainable. And actually, what I'm interested in doing, and I think this was part of the discussion, part of the talk, is creating these branches in different places. And one idea is to work with universities in different communities and then have the students, and sort of teach a class, like an escuela, a living library escuela or something, and then have the students from different disciplines, not just the arts, but the sciences and technology and other fields, you know, participating as part of their work as being a student to help it to grow in that community. So that's a strategy.
So in the Bernal Heights project that you were showing us, how did that fall apart? How did it end?
It's still going on.
Oh, it is?
You mean the nature walk?
Well, no, you showed us that now, you know, where you had the farm, it is now it's underneath the highway there are tents and homeless people on a chain fence. Wasn't that part of what was the original idea of the...
What I'm proposing is that freeway interchange become a northern gateway to the watershed.
So is that an addition that wasn't originally thought of when you... I'm trying to get an idea of
well, let me show you this
photograph,
again.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and show you this. So this is the nature walk prototype that was begun in 2002. And that is fabulous. You should go see it. There's a lot of signage in place, and a lot of transformation has happened. So now the goal, we're going to be expanding it here upstream with this 2 big projects that I'm working on here, and plus we have the schools programs. Meanwhile, I'm you know, talking to the various entities about this. So this is something that's sort of an ongoing opportunity. But you can't do everything all at once anyway. So what is your question?
Well, I was just looking at that photograph of the underpass with the chain link fence. And
right, that's the way it looks today.
But you've never been in that area. You've never.
No, I was in that in the 70s. I had.
That's what I'm saying. So when did it?
Why did that happen?
How did it end?
Okay.
How was it like?
Okay.
How did it get to where you had it really doing?
Okay.
The work that you did and it now.
Okay. Well, I left the farm at the end of 1980. And I went on to start a living library. And the people who were left at the farm continued for a few years. The city, as I mentioned, was not interested in having this interactive park. They didn't really understand the public-private partnership, which is the model that I was proposing, basically. And so I felt at that time that I had done as much as I could do, and so I left. And so this is in the 80s. Then there was the Potrero del Sol Park went in, beginning in 1980. And some years later, the current head of the Department of Public Works, Mohammed Nuru, set up something called SLUG, San Francisco League of Urban Gardeners. And their first project, their first farming community gardens project, was in the farm area. This is a guy who's now head of Public Works. Then he went on to work for Public Works. And what that department did is they are the ones that put up the fences. This was like probably in the late 80s, 90s. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And of course, the homeless problem has gotten worse and worse, you know. So what I was trying to do in the 70s was demonstrate and push the city to understand that in order to keep places safe and accessible, you need to activate them. And that's still true. That is like a really obvious thing. At least it was obvious to me. Now it's becoming more obvious to the city that that's true. So actually the planning department did a study on that freeway interchange and became very interested in my ideas, you know, ideas that I had developed in the 70s to include in their study that was done in the early 2000s, maybe 2010 or 2009. So, you know, there's this gap, but the ideas are still relevant. So it evolved to become what it is, but I'm suggesting that we don't have to keep it there. So we have to change that, and it needs to be reactivated in a different way. And I think that the watershed as a theme is a way to go, because it's there. It's normal, it's natural, and it's organic. Yes?
Thanks for coming to share your project with us. I am wondering, I guess the way I'm perceiving your, like, framework is that there is like a spiritual or metaphysical component to it. And I'm wondering, can you illuminate how, like, when was the moment where you came up with this idea of a living library, or a life frame, or, you know, like, what experiences informed this moment where you're like, oh, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to connect all these things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's a fabulous story about how a living library came to me. It was an epiphany. Sort of seeing the farm was an epiphany also. It's like, you know how things come together and you just kind of, sparks go off and everything happens? So I have those kinds of experiences when I can see things like that. After I left the farm at the end of 1980, I went to London and did an installation, and then I was in New York. And then I found myself in Bryant Park in March of 1981. And Bryant Park, for those who may not know it, is a Beaux-Arts park built in 1934, right in the heart of New York City, 42nd and 5th Avenue, next to the main research branch of the New York Public Library. And so I spent time in this park. It was very Beaux-Arts. Do you know what Beaux-Arts is? Very kind of formal design based on the 17th century French formal garden. And but it was very seedy. It had the structure of this formal garden, but it was very neglected. And it was where all the drug dealers went, so it was called Needle Park. And so I spent time in this place, sort of feeling the energy of it, and just looking at the resources and, you know, seeing the library next to it. And I had this epiphany. Oh, well, I know what we can do. We can bring the inside of the library outside and create gardens based on the Dewey Decimal System that would fit very neatly around the periphery of this place. I mean, I could show you pictures of it. It's not in this. And it fit very neatly. And then in each garden of knowledge would be plants that relate to the subject, and visual and performed artworks, and programs of lectures, demonstrations, research institutes, and state-of-the-art communications technologies, i.e. these green power digital gateways that would bring out more information from the library and would allow it to be then linked to other branches in different places. And then in the interior would be the perennial gardens that would involve the various embassies and consulates, the international gardens. And I thought, oh, the living library. I got very excited. The living library. And then I thought, no, I can't call it the living library because that would be an insult to its neighbor, the New York Public Library. So I said, okay, I'll call it a living library, meaning another. And that's when I realized the initial spelled all. So to me, that was a gift from the universe. So what we're talking about here is synchronicity. That's really what it, and synchronicity is part of nature. It's always going on. It's normal. But we usually don't see it because we're not tuned in. So when we're tuned in, I mean, I think that's the secret really, is when we're in our own alignment, when we're tuned in, that's when all of this magic happens. So that's how the name A Living Library came to be. It was a very honest, and I knew I was onto something fabulous because it's all. How could you miss? So I kept going.
Any other questions?
Tanya, you must have something.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted, I mean, she asked the question I was going to ask, but I'm also interested in how you convince and how you navigate the complication and intricate system of government and private and public, and you gave us a little insight in your presentation, but what are the things you have to confront that maybe are not the nice art stuff that we're hearing today, and how you keep the energy over time, and how you are able to convince people who might not, you know, what are the strategies you use? And
Well, as I said to you earlier, when you're working in the public realm, everybody shows up. So you're going to find people who are really fabulous and people who are the opposite of that, believe me. Well, plenty of those people. And you know, and the other thing is you just can't take it personally. You have to learn how, you know, it's not about me. Although some people will say to me, you're this, you're that, you're bad, you're a bully, you know. I mean, everything has happened. And then I swim. So I swim, you know, swim around the thing. But basically, why I do it is because I'm inspired. I mean, that's the heart of the matter. If I wasn't inspired, if I didn't think it was a good idea, I wouldn't bother. I mean, really. Because if I can see it, then I can do it. And, you know, and sometimes I think of what I do as experiential braille, you know, just kind of feeling my way. Because there's no roadmap, really, for this. And sometimes, you know, it doesn't work. I mean, you know, then there's another way. And then it's also, you know, you don't want to ask a question where somebody's going to say no. You know, it's better just not to ask the question or do some, you know, you don't want to be told no. That's bad. You know, so try and find a way to do something where you don't have to ask certain questions. I mean, really, I'm practical. You probably experienced that too. And you've been told no. In fact, you were locked out. But the other thing is that I am a very positive person. And so I think it's important to keep the energy positive and to really not think negative thoughts. You know, because at a certain point you realize, well, you know, you can choose what you're going to think. And so that's pretty basic. So you want to choose, if you can choose what you can think, choose something that makes you feel good. And if it really feels bad, then maybe you're not supposed to be doing it. I mean, that's the other thing. I think it's simple. You know, do things that make you feel good. And don't do things that make you feel bad. I mean, it's pretty simple in a way. And I think we get all hung up with a lot of stuff. So in some ways, I think I'm pretty simple at this point.
Okay, so it's 8 o'clock. I think we should have to close here. So thank you very much, Bonnie, for being here. It was amazing. Thank you.
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you, Bonnie. It was really, really amazing, the
Yeah?
presentation. Yeah. It's great.